Platemark is a podcast about prints and the printmaking ecosystem. In every episode, we'll hear from people who occupy various roles in that ecosystem. I'm your host, Anne Schaefer. I'm an independent curator who works to promote prints and printmaking through this podcast, through organizing fine art print fairs, and through organizing exhibitions. The goal of the pod is to demystify the world of prints and printmaking, which can be technically challenging, and to demonstrate the range of opportunities to work in this charming corner of the art world. This is a show that takes you behind the scenes to expose the generous, collaborative, and creative people working to better the world one print at a time. Before I introduce today's guest, I wanted to put in a plug for the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair, which is coming up super soon in April. The print fair runs from April 9 to 12. It runs at the same time as the IFPDA print fair in New York City. So New York Print Week is back on, folks. Tickets went on sale in the beginning of February, so they should be available to you over at brooklynprintfair.org. Head over there also to see our list of fine purveyors of prints. We've got gallerists and print shops and publishers, as well as academic departments and self-representing artists. So it really tries to hit every level of the ecosystem. Last year's print fair was super fun. It was our first, this is our second, and it is well worth the travel to Gowanus, Brooklyn. So I hope you all make plans to come out and see us. Today's guest is Stephen Hoskins. He is an emeritus professor from the University of the West of England, where he ran a fine print research center there for 25 years and is also a printmaker in his own right. He, this year, published a book alongside his co-author Michael Crane on ink. The book, Ink for Printmaking, The Art, Craft, and Chemistry of Ink, is a really fun and interesting read. I mean, I confess I totally geeked out on it. But he and Michael include a history of the development of inks from ancient China through the Middle Ages and from the Industrial Revolution up till now in the digital age. They explore inks for different forms of printmaking, specialist inks. They talk about environmental issues and recent developments in health and safety for the printmaker. So we talked wide-ranging about the book itself, about getting the book accomplished, and about the center that he developed at the University of the West of England. It's really a great conversation. He makes science fun, which, for me is pretty important. As I say in the pod, I had to be tutored all the way through Chemistry 101. All right, housekeeping. I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. Images we talk about are over in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. Over there, you can also hit support and donate and help me keep the lights on. All right, let's get rolling. Stephen, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining me on Platemark today.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Well, yeah, thanks. Somebody mentioned that you and Michael Crane were writing a book on ink, and I want to talk to the paper people, and I want to talk to the press repair guy, and all of that stuff. So when I saw you go by on ink, I was like, oh, it's time to dig in about ink. Before we go too far, can you introduce yourself for our listeners?
I'm Professor Stephen Hoskins. I'm Emeritus Professor of Printmaking at the University of the West of England. I ran the Centre for Fine Print Research there for 25 years, and I'm a practicing printmaker and have been for the last 50 years.
Stephen, honestly, when I think about you, and I mean, we'll get to your work and your interest in the digital aspects of and all of the things that go into your 3D work, which is fascinating to me. Also, the university's Center for Research. The ink seems like a really sort of far right, not far right politically, but like off to the side topic to be diving into, because your specialty feels like it's a little bit over in the mechanical end. So I'm fascinated that you decided to write a second book about ink.
Well, three ways of putting it. My daughter always says that I have the same publisher as Harry Potter, and I write the most boring books imaginable. But the reason for ink really stems way back before I wrote the first book, at the start of the Centre for Print Research, we were looking at a 19th century process called collotype. Now, a lot of people confuse that with colograph. But collotype is actually printing from a glass plate with bichromate gelatine on it. And we needed ink because it didn't exist anymore. The process had gone. So we started working with Cranfield to actually develop a collotype ink. And that developed, they at the time only made 10% of their ink for artists and 90% for industry. Now it's pretty much 100% for artists. But they didn't actually understand how the ink was used by the artists, because artists use ink quite differently to industry in a sense, even though it may appear to be the same product. I mean, I don't think it has been any more, 30 years or more, but that's a different argument. We then had a project which ran for 2 years, that how Cranfield will understand how the artists use the ink. It sounds odd, but they always sold their ink through a third party. So they didn't know the end user. And so after that, I wrote the first book. A lot of my early projects were about ink and how they work for things like screen printing. So there is a logic there, even though it might not sound. We then went down a digital road. So life became different.
Fascinating, because, well, in my brain, see, I come at this from such a different angle. The artist using the ink clearly necessitates a different kind of making of the ink. That makes sense. But to swing all of your you're thinking about artists' work into the digital feels like it goes straight back into industrial use.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's always my favorite. I always say printmakers forget that their process is fundamentally industrial process from the past.
Yes.
And even things like stone litho, people forget. You think of tamarind and you think of stone litho and you think it's very divorced from, but I was thinking this morning, June Wayne, when she started tamarind, was only 30 years after stone litho had still been used commercially in a lot of countries. I have posters, theatre posters on hand-drawn stones from the 1930s.
Amazing.
So, and they were producing 1,000 a day, prints from those stones. So, though the ink is divorced, the industry, I've always said we look back to go forward. So a lot of my digital work is about going back to the past and then bringing things that happened then forward, because people haven't followed the logical route.
Well, it's not a linear timeline. It's one of those looping string theory things.
Yeah, sort of. I think of it more of branches as a tree, and people wander down a branch, and then if you have to come back up to the trunk and go down a different one, but it's the same thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you wrote the first book about ink by yourself, not with Michael, right?
No, though Michael helped a lot in those days. But 2003, I think. Well, I actually wrote it about 2001, 2002, but it was 2004 when it came out.
I have heard from some shops that say, that's a Bible on our shelf, your book, the first book, and everyone's just thrilled and wanting to know how I got a copy early. Because it's not available.
Yeah, it's not out till August in the States. Right. It's out in England this week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
everyone's a little jealous.
Good.
Yeah. But I don't know. It touches on all sort of aspects, like the history of ink itself, the history of the industrial enterprise, and then it goes into this whole artist part, and then the chemistry. And I was like, my brain was about to explode. I'm like, how do you have all of that in your head?
Well, one thing, I've never expected people to read the thing from start to finish. I always consider it as something you might dip into when you want to know something. But yeah, I mean, lovely if people do read it. I mean, the history, I have to say, I like that aspect. I mean, for years, I was sat on the European Printing Museum's board, and I was chair for a couple of years. So I've always been part of the history of printing. So to me, there was no good history. So part of that was just me wanting to write more about the history of ink, rather than, hence going back to 6th century Afghanistan, where the first oil paint came from. And that's stuff that, as an academic, I know how to find it, but it's not been written up much. No. So that's kind of fun.
It is fun. The association, the European Printing Museums Association of
Europe, AEPM.
That's the one. I don't know that we have a similar thing in the United States, and you correct me if I'm wrong.
No, some of the people like Hamilton type are part of AEPM. It's sort of international now. I think it's about 130 museums, which are part of the Association of Printing Museums.
If I am shocked that there are that many printing museums in the world, I'm pretty sure my listeners are too.
There's a lot of them in Germany.
Oh my goodness, it's insane.
Yeah. I mean, there's not really one at all in the UK, and in the States there's 2 or 3, but Europe has printing museums. Don't know why. Hence my top 10.
Well, right, yeah. So before we started rolling, I was telling Stephen that I tripped over his YouTube video that lays out his top 10 printing museums to visit, and thinking about, setting an itinerary for a trip. And your top number one was the only one on your list that I've been to, which is in Antwerp, the Platemark. I'm gonna bungle the name. You say it.
The Plantain Moretus.
That's it.
In Antwerp. It's a World Heritage Site.
It's been a long time. I was on a courier trip, and I was like, I got to go see this thing because I'm in the print department, right? But it was fascinating. I was like,
beautiful.
Yeah, really cool. Super cool. Yeah.
And the gardens are good, and the beer's excellent.
And it's right near the Rubens house, so
it is just down the road from the Rubens.
Right, you can hit it all. But the rest of them, some of them are in the basement of something else, and it's like, in the States, I think there are a lot of people who sort of collect all of the presses and things, and sort of have a ad hoc museum in their basement. But I love that the Europeans are so organized about it.
Yeah, and some of my favorites, like we're digressing maybe from him. Some of my favorites, like the Museum of Work, which is the Musée der Arbeit in Hamburg, are great because they're actually social historic museums about the people and things, as well as the printing presses. So that's really interesting.
It also points to something that my partner in the History of Print series that we do, that we talk about all the time, which is that print and printing and the dissemination of information is fundamental to our history across any kind of history you want to pull out of, human existence.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's all there. But sometimes I think in your list of museums, it wasn't clear that it was it was a museum about other things. And then there was this wonderful section on printing.
There are 2 or 3 of my top 10. The Museum of Work has a hair comb and an enamel factory as part of their museum. The Mayat has textiles and printing.
That one looks cool. I want to go there.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That is good. Yeah. And Ghent's gorgeous.
Yes. Yes. I have been to Ghent. As a kid. Anyway, back to the ink book. So tell me about your partnership. I'm always fascinated by how the project starts. Like, A, how do you find a publisher? B, how do you assemble all the stuff, the photographs, and how I'm curious about how your relationship with Cranfield Colors and Michael Crane on the writing, how did that go?
Right. But the relationship with Michael is, as I say, 25 years. We've no, maybe longer, that we've known each other. And in fact, in an odd way, my relationship with Michael goes back to the 80s. I originally was a master printer for a company called London Contemporary Arts, who I set up, who employed, in the 80s, they were big hotel art printers and printed all the stuff for hotels. And we employed about 22 printers at the time, so it was big business. And the Charbonnel family, if you come across Charbonnel etching inks, it was very sad. The father and the son died and just left the mother running the business.
Oh.
Really sad. And you couldn't get inks. We used to have to fly to Paris to buy ink to come back. And in the end, found Michael's uncle, George, who made us some ink, which is how Cranfield started making ink.
Oh, my gosh.
Because Charbonnel, in the end, sold the family business to the Franken-Bourgeois, who sold it to Windsor, etc., etc. So they're now part of a big conglomerate. So in that sense, I always knew Cranfield existed. And it was the end of the 80s when I wanted color typing, I went to Cranfield. And there, literally, I live in North Somerset, Cranfield's in South Wales. So as the crow flies, it's probably 15 miles.
Oh, wow.
I have to drive 50 miles around to get to it because there's an estuary in the way. But they're not that far away. So, we've slowly built up a really good working relationship over the years.
When I was reading the book, I I mean, I knew that all of the different inks for the different techniques are different, but I don't think I realized quite how specific and how different they all were. Like the collotype thing, which I think you lump together with photogravure, if I'm correct, is so different than etching ink. Can you give us a little taste of what the base?
Think of it in a different set of scales. An etching ink, because it has to go down into the line and be wiped clean, invariably needs a bigger particle because it has to sit in the line while you wipe the surface off. It's the easiest way I always think to think about it, which is why often people hand make their own ink, because you end up with big grainy particles. If you want to leave plate tone, you have a bit of a finer grind. But essentially, compared to litho, you've got big lumps of pigment, rocks in a sense. Not quite, but whereas for litho, you're trying to put down a really small, thin layer. And so the pigment has to be much smaller, and therefore it's more intense and a tinier particle. And then the oil is looser.
Got it. Okay. So in America we say litho, but I'm going with litho today. So with the litho inks,
sorry, yeah,
okay.
I'm English. I can speak American.
It's okay. If the grain of pigments is smaller, the intensity is because it's more dispersed and you can get more.
No, because you've got far more. Oddly, if you think of two big circular particles, then they come close together, but there's a big gap in between. If you've got lots of tiny particles, you've actually got more surface area. So the light reflected of them makes the color more intense.
Okay.
All right?
Did you get that, everybody?
So the tinier the particle, in theory, the more surface area there is. But that also depends on the pigment loading in there.
Okay. Because with yes, somebody told me that the litho inks are much more intense, and it makes sense because you're laying down such a microscopic layer.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think, well, if I'm putting a thick layer down for relief ink and a thin layer for litho ink, the relief is going to be more intense. But that isn't always the case, because it depends on how much pigment to vehicle or oil there is,
right,
and what size the particle is.
Okay. I'm no scientist. True confessions, I am no scientist. And
that's all right.
So when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, I might have to ask. And
it is quite good. Michael and I often, Michael has this lovely story to describe the disconnect between the way printmakers talk about ink, because we talk about sloppy and buttery and things. Michael talks about length and tack and reflectance and. Okay, so two different.
Yeah.
Michael's story is he had an agent who went into a French hotel one day, and there were two rooms. One had a bathroom, one had a shower. And he wanted to know basically what the difference in price was, but said, what's the difference between the two rooms? And the man said, in the shower you stand up, and in the bath you lay down.
More water, less water?
Well, sort of, but it's just, that's not a description you'd make between a shower and a bath.
No.
And that's the difference, I think, between the way Michael, I can talk to Michael about it, or do you see what I mean? The difference between buttery and sloppy and length and tack.
Yeah. Yeah, that did get a little confusing, I have to say. But it all made sense, like the diagrams and everything that I don't know who drew your diagrams for you. I suppose maybe you or some of your students. But they were super clear for the layman who is not a scientist. That would be me. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Although I have to say, somehow through all of my schooling, I don't know why, managed to not take any color theory. So when I was reading about subtractive and additive light, I was like, I don't understand.
Right. Yeah. It is a difficult one. RGB is additive light. So how would you describe it? If you held up a filter and the light comes through and you get red light, that's additive light. So if you mix red light that's come through a filter with green light that's come through a filter with yellow light that comes through a filter, you end up with white. Okay, so you mix them together and it makes white light. Subtractive color is what happens when the light comes down and bounces off the surface and comes back again. Okay. And so you then actually are viewing, because the particle of, shall we say, red is there, it will, well, let's call it green. It absorbs all the light that's not green, and you only see what's left, which is the green, which is reflected out.
Okay.
That's sort of the easiest way to describe it.
Well, also in the charts, the RGB, somehow you were referring to them as the primary color. How can green be a primary color if it's a mix of blue and yellow?
It's not.
Okay.
There was a whole thing at one time that there was somebody who said blue and yellow don't make green.
Uh-oh.
And in additive terms, they don't. But in subtractive terms, they do.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, I got to do more reading clearly.
Yeah. I think the thing is printmakers only use subtractive color.
Okay. Thank you.
99% of the time. The confusion, which I always find hard to talk to people about, is when it comes to digital. Okay. Basically, your desktop printer, this is going to be really confusing, and I apologize. Your desktop printer thinks in RGB. So you're always much better sending RGB files to your desktop printer or your wide format printer than CMYK files. And then it will convert them and print them. Otherwise, you lose color. But it's an argument that lots of people don't get and say, oh, I have to use this, and I must send CMYK files. You're using less color if you do that. But sorry, I could go on for hours.
I'm sure. But wait a minute. So when I was doing some graphic design, we were taught that you should build your files in CMYK if you were sending it to a printer.
Yeah, if you want something, there's two ways. If you're sending it to a commercial printer, your commercial printer thinks in the CMYK set that he's got. So he'll tell you that's usually something called swap. Okay, it's standard offset color. And he wants that color because that's what he can print. And if you send him something with, shall we say, a lipstick red or a bright orange in it, he can't print it. It just doesn't happen in his color set. So he doesn't want files that have lots of bright color in. If you're a printmaker and you've got your wide format 12 color printer, I've got one over here, and you want to print out, then you don't want to reduce it down to that minimum cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, because I've got 12 colors in my printer. So if I start with an RGB file, especially RGB Adobe 1998, I'm not losing any color. So I'm sending a file that's taking as much color as possible to my printer, and then it will print to the best of its ability. Whereas if I send it a CMYK file, I've reduced down, I've thrown away lots of orange, and I've thrown away lots of green, and then when I send it, I won't get a bright orange or a bright green because I haven't sent it.
Wait,
does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does. Wait, if I can just break it down even farther. So the CMYK printer he's only using the 4 colors, but the RGB breaks down into the 12.
That's right.
Okay.
It's a thing called color space, and I'm sorry to say that. Color space is as much color as you can possibly think of. It's huge, all right? And at one end, it goes into infrared, and the other goes into ultraviolet, and we can't see those. But in the visible space, it's a big, lumpy space. RGB, because it's additive light, sees a lot of that space. And there's something called Adobe 1998, which everybody technically agrees on, that's a big color space, right? Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, because you're only using 4 additive colors and you're mixing the dots together to make more colors, is very restricted. It's a tiny space in the middle of this giant space. So as soon as you work in this tiny space, if you send it to 3 different printers, your CMYK file, it'll come out pretty much looking the same because you've sent it. But it won't have a bright orange or a bright green. Whereas if you send a Adobe 1998 file to a 12 color printer, you'll get lots of bright colors and lots of. If you send your CMYK file, it'll come out the same as your litho print, but it won't have the bright reds and the bright greens.
Wow.
Make sense?
Yes, I think so.
Sorry.
It's okay.
That's just one tiny aspect of this whole.
All right. So let's circle back to the other kinds of inks, because that's our original topic.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. So etching ink and litho ink
Litho
are
ink.
very
Litho ink.
easy to understand the differences.
Yeah.
And then relief ink seems to me to be closer to etching ink.
It is. It just has to be slightly different because you need to be able to roll it into actually a much thicker layer. You might, everybody, you don't roll a thick layer for litho for relief, and you sort of don't, but you're rolling a much thicker layer than you would roll for litho.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you've got to be able to put more pigment down and a thicker layer. And that's why those inks are different. They're not developed for wiping.
And that means a tackier or...
They're possibly tackier, yes. But again, it just depends on what you find easy to use. A lot of the time, it's down to personal preference.
Well, sure. Yeah.
But the one thing I will stress is incredibly important for printmaking inks is something called single pigment. Single pigment means your ink is made from one color. Okay, so you've got a single pigment ink. That means it's less likely to fade and you have less problems. Here we go, technical again, sorry, something called metamerism. Okay, metamerism. In England, we have a store called Marks and Spencer who have very different lighting to every other store. So if you buy something brown from Marks and Spencer's, because it's made traditionally from our point of view, red, green and blue mixed together, okay, under Marks and Spencer's lighting, that brown probably looks different to the brown when you take it out into daylight. Because one or other of those pigments will reflect more in different light. So if you buy a commercial litho ink off the shelf, it might have been mixed from more than one pigment. In which case it might fade faster and it might also, well, probably will fade incredibly quickly because they're not designed commercial inks to last more than 6 months. But also it might look different under different lighting conditions. If you buy a single pigment artist ink, it will pretty much look the same under all different lighting conditions.
Okay, I'll buy that. This is why we're asking you all the questions. Why does a mix of two different not single pigments fade faster?
That's partially to do with particle size. Well, in a way, it's often to do with which pigments they choose. Right. A lot of pigment, Michael, this is where you need Michael rather than
okay.
A lot of pigment is wetted down and comes from the chemical, well, most pigments come from the chemical industry. We need to talk about that as well. We'll get on to that in a minute, the difference between what people think of natural earth pigments. There is a lot to cover. The pigments that are wetted down, they can be cheap or they can be expensive. Let's put it that way. Artists' ink invariably uses good quality, expensive pigment, which means it's less likely to fade. Okay, and the mixed pigments are likely to fade more rather than a single pigment because you get a bigger particle, which it will take longer to deteriorate.
Oh,
basically.
Okay. Oh, huh. In the book, you mentioned a couple of times that the commercial inks that are going into the newspaper production are obviously not, it's not required for them to last and not fade.
No.
Right? So do the ink producers, they have to work harder to make it light fast?
Yes. And there are only, this is where we have to get into, and in a sense, good that Michael's not here. There are now very, very few, because he'd get embarrassed. There are very, very few artist ink manufacturers who are making proper artist ink. And I would say Cranfield is almost the last who uses powdered pigment. Dean Clark at Graphic Chemicals did, but Dean's not been very well in recent years, and that's difficult. I think Gamblin still do. And of course, Charbonnel probably do, but they're part of a commercial conglomerate, so it's harder to know. But I suspect they might still grind pigment. But yeah, a triple roll mill, which is explained in the book,
is
what's necessary for making a good quality artist ink. And unless we support those people like Michael,
that's true.
They're few and far between, and we need to be aware that ink would then disappear.
Yes, I agree. But some of what you're saying is kind of advocating for you to make your own ink.
Not entirely to make your own ink. If you're an etcher, I would recommend making your own ink is a good thing to do. And I used to back in the day when I was a student, because you can control how that ink wipes and whatever. One of the problems with making your own ink, and one of the things that people don't always notice, is to do with the absorption of the particle. If you imagine the particles are blown up of fluffy rocks, right? So they've got lots of edges on them. So when you mix all that together and you grind it together, if you leave it for a couple of years, the oil will slowly work its way around the whole surface. And so that ink will thicken in the tin. Most inks invariably get thicker in the tin. There are a few of certain ultramarines have a tendency to get thinner. If you make your own ink, it will get thick very quickly. Not only oxidizing as it dries, but also as the oil works its way around the surface.
Wait a minute. No, wait, no. The oil penetrating all of the nooks and crannies equals drier? How's that possible?
Absorption is the easiest way to describe it. The pigment absorbs that oil. It doesn't actually go into the pigment. It actually goes into the nooks and crannies of the pigment, but does the same thing as you're thinking of sponge.
Okay.
All right. Because basically, if you're a sponge, you're filling all the holes in a sponge.
Maybe I should have started our entire conversation by telling everyone that I had to be tutored all the way through Chemistry 101. Oh my God. If I can't see it, it makes no sense. Okay. But the drying thing, if you're making your own ink, it will dry faster. But you can't.
It'll just dry. There's no problems in making your own ink. I just wouldn't recommend doing it for litho. I would for etching, because that's good. And I might for relief. And certainly I might, which again might be contentious, I might adjust an ink with pigment rather than adding things like magnesium to it.
Hold on.
But that's being contentious, I'm sorry. And Michael wouldn't agree with that.
Okay. So wait, explain. Please explain.
Okay, but sometimes people want that their ink is just not right. It's too runny, shall we say, in printmaker's term for litho. So they tend to throw a load of magnesium in, which is transparent and it's not great, and it will alter the ink, but it's not always the best thing to use. Whereas you could use a bit of finely ground pigment and that would do the same thing. But people don't tend to do that. I don't know why.
Well, I'm going to guess that most people don't have a little pigment grinding station in their shop.
Yeah, that's true. But to be fair, you can do a lot of that with a glass Muller and a piece of, and
easy for you to say. But there's...
I was brought up in the 70s grinding ink with a Muller and stone. In those days, it was common to make your own ink.
Is that right? No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
This is like when commercial watercolors became available in tubes and it transformed English watercolors and landscape painting.
I think exactly that.
Yeah.
And in the past, I've made pastels and
you have?
crayons. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ralph Mayer's great on how to make pastels.
Oh, my God. I did watch a video about some French pastel maker and mixing. It was fascinating. I had no idea how those were made. That was incredible.
Gum Arabic is great.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
It's insane. All right. So we've circled back to relief, but we haven't touched on your specialty, which is screen print.
Screen printing.
The basics of the ink is different than the others in what way?
The basis of the ink is totally different because it comes from a petrochemical basis. The pigment's the same, but the vehicle is different. Good old-fashioned linseed oil. Both Michael and I are huge advocates for linseed oil because linseed it's natural, harmless flax crop. And oddly enough, even when it's grown as a monoculture, compared to soy, which just destroys everything, linseed, when you harvest it, a lot of the seed goes back into the ground. You can't harvest it all. It regenerates some of the soil. So it's actually quite healthy for the soil. And it's grown in a very different way. Soy destroys areas of jungle. It was used for the commercial industry because they could make huge amounts of it and it sounded more natural. Linseed oil is getting difficult to get. And again, we need to support. I'm going to be contentious. I think linseed as an oil and using linseed-based products is much, much better environmentally than trying to use the safe etching products and the safe relief product, because those were theoretically safer for the user 25 years ago. Now, life's different. The environment is more important
than human safety. Well, you made it good and...
Sorry, I'm pontificating.
No. I mean, that was a good point in the book. I thought that in fact, the, safe, non-toxic or whatever, that the thinking about it is shifting, or you're proposing that we shift our thinking about it.
I am.
Yeah.
Radically. Yeah. And I was never ultimately very happy with aspects of the safe etching or the non-toxic. But life has moved on, and we have to rethink things. So it's not that they were wrong then, but now we have to consider the environment much more carefully. And a lot of the acrylic products, and mea culpa, I use acrylic-based screen printing inks, are creating microparticles. And there is an advocacy that maybe some of the hydrocarbons which are used, they're offshoots of the petroleum industry. And yeah, they're not great, but they will break down in the environment more because they're carbon, essentially. A hydrocarbon is fundamentally carbon. They will burn and break down better, perhaps, than the microparticles of acrylic inks. So would we, and again, I'm unsure about this, would we be better going back to the unhealthy screen printing inks because they're better theoretically, possibly for the environment? Or should we be doing as ZMAs does, which is precipitating out the microparticles, if we can precipitate them all out? And then what do we do with our acrylic sludge? Difficult.
It is difficult.
I don't think there's an easy answer.
Yeah, because, I mean, the acrylics, it's basically just plastic, right?
Yeah. But then, plastics are hydrocarbons, and it depends on which and where and how and whether they're going to break down. Yeah, exactly. None of it is simple.
Oh my gosh.
And that's the same as everyday life. I mean, what do we do about our plastic bags? If they could be recycled properly, life would be easier. And the same applies to artist materials. And John Rizzo, have you ever come across John Rizzo?
No.
He used to be a professor. We did a thing back in 2011, John Rizzo and I, about the life cycle of artists' products environmentally. And one of the things that came out of it was that we use such a tiny proportion compared to the rest of the volume of the world in our artist materials that there's almost a trade-off from the satisfaction and pleasure it gives to people compared to what we're doing to destroy the planet in a minute way, because most of the decisions you make are really difficult ones. And there isn't an easy answer.
Right.
People making things from vegetable dye and things isn't necessarily chemically any safer, right, or environmentally friendlier. It's a long, complicated chain for all these things. And you have to kind of look at the whole life cycle, which is, for a lot of things, really hard to do.
But with the oil-based inks, it's not it's the linseed oil, obviously, as you've pointed out, is fine. It's the solvents used in cleanup, right? That's the problem?
Yes. But then everybody uses the orange solvent, the one that smells of oranges or lemons or whatever. It started out coming from vegetables, but the solvent it's created in the end is not that dissimilar to the solvent we use as a petrochemical. So environmentally, it's not necessarily much better. Less is the answer.
Well, right.
Use less of everything.
Right.
It's the only solution I can give you.
It hits on every note, like paper towels using up all the trees versus the electricity used in laundering all of the cloth,
Yeah. I mean, I would say try and use a minimal amount of a good quality product for everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Cotton paper. I mean, I would advocate for mold-made artist paper because the Somerset Mill is 12 miles down the road from me. Of course, I would advocate for them. But I think there's an answer. If you're spending your time making something then I would use the best materials possible, because your time has got to be worth the best materials.
Well, and you make a point in the book about, I mean, it basically comes down to stability and light fastness of the materials that you've done all this work to make a print or whatever you're making. And if it starts fading in 5 years, it's sort of worthless.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's, yes, listen up, everybody.
And again, it's down to, if we don't look after those specialist suppliers who make our paper and our ink and our tools and our materials, they'll disappear.
Right. Yes, as so many have already.
Exactly.
Yeah. Everybody's favorite Daniel Smith,
Yeah, exactly. And, Mr. Lyon's he made all the beautiful tools. I mean, he made me a beautiful set of tools. Very elderly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like this interesting reversion to craft, the craftsman, the individual craftsperson, the guy in Paris who's making all the tools. What's his name?
Oh, I forget. But they're beautiful. They're really nice. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, really. Okay, so we're circling back.
Yeah,
I'm going to keep you to it. So some people might be able to go back to oil-based screen printing ink.
Possibly.
Can you make that yourself?
No, you have to buy that commercially. I mean, I use an American screen printing ink. I personally, for 25 years, have used TW from Los Angeles. Lovely guy who first started it. Yeah, because the pigment quality is superb. They originally made ink for the wallpaper in Boeing aircraft, and the quality of their pigment is fabulous. And they make a gloss and a whatever. And in the end, I filter my water these days. And I use a water-based TW, which is my favorite.
Huh.
It's a hard ink to use because it's like an old-fashioned solvent screen printing ink. It dries incredibly quickly.
Oh.
And you have to de-acidify your screen with an alkaline before you print. But apart from that, it's great. I love it.
Well, and it must be fairly humid there, so that must help a little bit.
Yeah. There's relatively high humidity here.
Because I was interviewing an artist who lives and teaches on the interior of Vancouver, so not along the coast where it's a rainforest, but the interior, which is apparently desert-like, and all they can use there are the UV inks.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's so dry.
Right. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
So innocent. I know nothing.
Yeah.
All right. So
comes to us all.
At the end of the book, you dive into digital inkjet inks, which I confess I skipped because I was running out of time. What's the dealio with those inks?
Incredibly minute pigment particles, incredibly intense color. It's fascinating. Hewlett-Packard used to pay part of my salary for about 10 years. They sponsored a chair for me when we worked a lot on inkjet ink with them. Interestingly, at one point we had some white ink. They gave us some white ink because I was insisting that we should be able to have white ink in the ink set. As a printmaker, you would. And only Roland, but anyway, we won't go down the white ink road. But the fascinating thing was we tried putting white ink, digital white ink, onto black Somerset. You couldn't see it.
What?
And the particles so fine that you couldn't see the white. We had to put 4 layers down before you could see on top of each other. So we had to keep putting it back through the printer before you even saw the white, which gives you an idea of how thin and minute and intense color that inkjet color is.
It didn't have anything to do with the absorption of the paper or anything.
It had a bit to do with the absorption of the paper, sure. But fundamentally, well done. if you put a UV down on it, yes, it won't sink in the same way. But yes, it did have to do with the absorption of the paper. But as an example of how thin and minute a layer it is, it's fascinating.
Huh.
I mean, as everybody says, gram for gram, it's more expensive than gold. But there's a lot of technology in there because it's about 80% water.
It is?
Yeah, an awful lot of water in inks.
It's liquid I guess that makes sense. Oh my God, I thought it was always powder. Wow.
Epson actually is a piezo which fires an electrical charge and pushes it across. But an HP and a Canon printer are what are known as thermal heads, which actually heat the ink up to create a the little tiny spot of ink. But yeah.
The amount of research that must have gone into the development of all of these technologies back when we were in the 80s or whenever that was.
Oh, wonderful. I had an old friend, John Meyer, who worked at HP's research labs in Silicon Valley, who showed me a school exercise book from 1966 with his first tests for an inkjet printer. It was called the HP ThinkJet, where he used Quink ink. Did you ever get the writing ink?
Mm-mm.
Oh, in England, you have this ink called Quink that you dip your dip pen in to write with. And he used that ink in this, and there were just these little tiny splattery patches in this exercise book from 1966.
Oh, my God.
Some of the earliest inkjet printing.
Wait, that was back in the 60s?
Yeah, the very first, 1964, A.B. Dick had a inkjet, the first ever commercial inkjet printer, which printed the date stamp on the top of a baked bean tins.
Oh my God. I was born in 1964, so I'm just kind of like my brain is exploding. So, but the other thing that I saw, which is not in the book, but it was in the video I was watching this morning about your top 10 favorite printing museums, was the machine that had the strings that printed the ruled paper for schools.
Beautiful. Yeah.
What? Tell us. I've never seen or thought about that process.
No, I always regret giving one up. It used to have, your school exercise book used to have, shall we say, green lines one way and then the odd pink line the other way. The paper used to go through and there were bottles above the string, and by capillary action, the dye, because it was dye rather than pigment, would run down the string. So the paper would just touch the string as it passed, which would create the line. And so the paper would roll through, and then it would be turned and go in the opposite direction to do the pink line.
Oh my God. With string and dye.
With string and dye.
That's incredible.
Wonderful. And one of my big regrets in the end of 1989, about 90, somebody wanted to give me one. And it's about the size of my baby workshop here. It was about 12 feet long and 9 feet high and weighed about 4 tons. So I had nowhere to put it.
Why did they have to be so big?
Just because of Victorian machinery.
I see. Weird. I mean, cool.
Yeah.
I was amazed in the book, in the early parts of the book, that you're describing all sorts of things about how you measure ink and the viscosity and all that stuff. And the teardown situation was super cool about matching to the next batch of color, which I want to ask you about. But
the drawdown.
The draw. What did I call it?
Teardown, but it's a drawdown. But yeah.
The brain is not working today.
Don't worry.
Well, and the other one was the cylinder thing that the ink dripped down.
Yeah.
What was that for?
That's to measure the viscosity.
But it all seems so unmeasurable. Do you know?
Yeah, it does sound like that in theory, but in reality, what you're measuring is not a universal measurement, but just against the things in your factory or your workshop that you're comparing against. So it doesn't have to be calibrated across the world, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
It only has to be that in your workshop that a falling bar viscometer takes 12 seconds or whatever, and if the ink takes 12 seconds for the next batch, the viscosity, so the stickiness of the ink or the thickness of the ink is the same across those two batches.
It still seems super imprecise to me.
A lot of those tests in factories. And I shouldn't say this, but I will. There's a beautiful test, 2 tests that I love for paper, and a certain paper mill not too far from me does it, and I love it. One, they melt a piece of wax and do what they call a pick test. So they melt a lump of wax on a stick that goes onto and then they peel it off to see how much paper comes out.
Oh.
Yeah, a very basic. And the other one is they do a watercolor test to see how the paper stumbles up. When you paint watercolor, so they have this tacky old brush and a pot of blue across the top until it stumbles up. I think,
So it's
that's sort of not a real test.
How many passes of the brush it takes?
Yeah. But because they've always done it, that's the way it is, and it functions perfectly well, because as long as you only apply it in that environment, it works. I mean, there's a traditional color fading test called the blue wool test, which has 7 shades of blue, and you get this particular dye and you put it out in the daylight and see how it fades. Actually, for the experienced people who can look at those blue wool tests and have done it for 20 years, are far more accurate than any electronic measurement device.
I believe it.
But it's got to be in that environment.
Sure.
I love all those.
But the matching color drawdown situation also is completely subjective.
No.
What? Oh, all right. Tell me.
No. A drawdown is not subjective. The only thing I would say with a drawdown are 2 things. Because their drawdown paper strips have a black bar across them printed, so that when they can look at the transparency. But I mean, I do drawdowns before I print on any paper I print on, and I use the end of a palette knife and draw down. And then I always cut mine. And if you cut them and lay them next to each other and do a visual test, that's, again, because I've been doing it for so many years, is much more accurate than trying to measure it with a spectrometer.
Okay. So if you're trying to match a color that you mixed and don't have enough of, and you need more, and you do a drawdown, how do you fix the color?
How do you mean?
Well, like if the red is coming up too, or that part seems super interesting.
That's just down to experience. The other thing we use with screen printing, I actually try and keep enough of the old pot that I actually dribble a bit of the new one into the old pot, and I can then check it as a wet paint sample against. What you add is subjective.
Okay.
I agree with that entirely. And you could measure it on a spectrophotometer, but then you'd have to plug into your spectrophotometer measurements of each of the colors, individual colors you already have. And again, because commercially people only use 4, a spectrophotometer, there aren't many spectrophotometers that would read individual colors. I mean, there are, and you can buy them, and they're expensive, but they usually read squares and patches because you've got halftones everywhere.
Right. Oh, God.
Sorry.
Jesus.
It's just the way it is commercially.
I was interviewing a printer, May Shore, the other day, who said that in her early career, she was kind of a Pantone mixologist specialist person, and that somebody could call out a number and she could tell you what color it is.
Yeah.
Bad. That's bad. But she was saying that it was all percentages.
Yes, it is, because they start with 12 basic colors. Pantone has 12 colors, again, which is quite interesting, so more than the 4, and it's percentages of each of those 12.
And then she said that it was all down to the grams, like weighing the grams. But don't different pigments have different densities?
Yes, they do. And in Pantone, that's worked out. So yellow is less intense than ultramarine, shall we say.
Right.
So you'd use less weight of ultramarine than you would of yellow to get a particular.
I'm sure. I have no doubt the Pantone has it all sorted out, and there's this giant chart somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And there will be, because they manufacture their 12 colors very specifically.
Right.
And so you always know if you have 100 grams of this and 50 grams of that and 25 grams of that, you will get that Pantone. The problem with Pantone is, as an artist, I always want the colours in between.
Me too.
I never want the one that's on the swatch. I want the one that's in between this bit of the swatch and that.
I mean, it looks like a bazillion colours, but it's not actually.
No, it's not. It's not at all.
But this is going to sound super elementary, Stephen. What are they making chemically generated pigments? Like, what are we dealing with here?
We go back to Perkins, who precipitated in 1854. Perkins invented and dyes the first purple dye, known as Perkins purple. And because purple couldn't be made, that's why it was a royal colour for all those things. And basically, he boiled up tar, in very simple terms, he boiled up tar, heated tar, and then precipitated it out. So in other words, cooled it so that you get a pigment deposit. All right.
So something separates inside the...
Yes, it all separates and it becomes into a gas.
Okay.
All right. And then as you cool it, it precipitates, so it creates particles.
Okay.
And that's pretty much how all colour is now made.
Whoa.
And a lot of it came from the pharmaceutical industry, believe it or not.
So they're making colours by mistake and suddenly there's a pigment?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, exactly.
But
it's all precipitated out because of consistency. You could have a natural earth ochre, right? And you could happily you could get a ton of ochre, which is an iron ore, or hematite, or any of those natural occurring earth colours. You can grind it up and you can make a very good paint or printmaking ink or whatever you want. The trouble is, if you went back and dug a bit more and made the same one, the next batch might be a different colour to the batch you've got at the moment. So everybody uses precipitated out pigments and dry powder pigments because they're consistent. Because you want to be able to buy your ochre this year, which was the same colour out the tube you bought 10 years ago.
right.
To do it all from natural occurring ores would be a problem.
The thing out of which you're precipitating these new colors is some
That's
natural...
I know. It pretty much all comes from the petroleum industry.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's weird. Oh, weird.
Yeah. But whether it's your car or what you paint, it was all coming from the same sources. Oh. So it doesn't matter what you buy, the pigment is going to be a problem everywhere.
Oh, Jesus.
So there's nothing you can do about that. Because you can't, unless you want to paint in muddy brown and sludge green, you're in trouble.
Holy cannoli. So
if you separate out the pigment from the vehicle, you can make good choices on the vehicle because you can have linseed oils and that's good.
Sure.
And those do, even cleaning them up. But I think there's a balance between all those weird things that people use and vegetable oils and just using a small amount of solvent. I still use solvents and they break down in the soil. So
right.
Not great, but nothing is.
Right, exactly. So this is going to sound super elementary, but I've always wondered and never thought to ask. The difference between a pigment in linseed oil for a printing application and a paint is what? The binder, the vehicle.
Yes, the vehicle, the binder. The pigment is the same.
Right. And in painting, it's
a looser oil.
Okay.
So it's just looser.
Okay.
Linseed oil still, but in terms of, you were talking about the falling bar viscometer.
Yeah.
So if you put linseed for paint in there and put the bar in, it would travel down very quickly. For etching ink, it would travel down quite slowly.
But when you squeeze paint out of a tube on your palette, like you can do that impasto thing. It's pretty...
Yeah, it's pretty... Then we're getting into thixotropic property.
When I saw that word in your book, I was like, what in the heck is that?
Oh God, how can we... Butter substitutes. You buy a butter substitute and you spread it on your... And it's just made from water and oil that's been whisked. If you whisk cream hard, it gets thicker. That's a thixotropic property. Okay, you can mix two things together like water and oil and whisk them hard, and it will get thicker and thicker the more you whisk it, because the more you're blending those tiny little globules. So instead of having big globules of water and oil, you've got smaller and smaller and smaller globules mixing together, which makes it thixotropic, so it makes it thicker.
But also, aren't you aerating?
But all those things, yeah. I'm trying to be simple. Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
but yeah, so there's a mixture of things going on always.
Oh, my heavens. All right. Well, all is to say, folks, that you should get the book when it comes out at a store near you. Don't buy from Amazon. I didn't say that out loud. And let's turn we've already talked a whole hour about inks, but I do want to ask you about the center, which was your brainchild. back in the 80s.
1998.
Oh, okay. What is it, and how in the world did you pull it off?
Okay, slight bit of academic history.
Okay.
In 1994, England always had what were universities and then something called polytechnics. Both offered degrees. The polytechnics were more applied, so did engineering, and the universities were supposedly more esoteric. Somebody decided that we're all going to be universities, and the universities had traditionally done research, and the polytechnics hadn't.
Oh.
And suddenly there was some money around for research. Now, slightly more complicated, the art schools in England had become attached to the polytechnics.
Oh.
So suddenly the art schools became part of university culture.
That's so interesting because, yes, there are technical aspects to art making, but it's also esoteric.
Yeah, but it was just history. There was no logic.
Okay.
But the art schools mainly became attached to the polytechnics, and then the polytechnics became universities. So suddenly for art and design, there was research money available, which hadn't been there before. And there was a bunch of money to bring new researchers up because they hadn't been allowed to have any money before. So I had some money initially to look at water-based screen printing inks. I was employed to do some research in water-based screen printing, hence my first book on water-based screen.
All right, there it is.
There it is, yeah. That's how it started. And then I got interested in color type because I was interested at the time. Color type was the best reproductive process. There's another process called Woodbury type, which I think is even better, but we won't go down the Woodbury type.
Well, no one's doing Woodbury types anymore, are they?
Oh, no, we did for a while.
I bet you did.
We started on research as what was a reproduction and how close could you get to reality as digital was just coming in.
Oh.
Then I started getting research money because as the digital inkjet was coming in, they were all looking for a white and a black. Huh. The whole thing, when you talk to any of the digital guys in the 90s, it was, how do we get the blackest black and how do we get the whitest white? And we started doing things like Woodbury type to show them that you had these beautiful reproductive processes that weren't white, they weren't black. The best Woodbury type black's muddy grey, and the white is light grey. But in between are all these beautiful tones. So I started, something came along called the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and I just started winning grants. And I had a lot of grants. We used to earn about £500,000 a year in grants. Serious money.
Wow.
Yeah. And then because we had all the grants and because we started doing digital stuff, and Hewlett-Packard gave us machinery, because Hewlett-Packard gave us machinery, Canon gave us machinery, because Canon gave us machinery, Roland gave us machinery. So then we had all this digital kit. The other thing to say is that I didn't want to be a poor artist as well as being an academic. So I reckoned if 2/3 of my money came from doing this research with industry, I could spend 1/3 of it on working with artists, which was how we started working with people like Richard Hamilton, and that, because we could spend time because we had all the funds from elsewhere, and I could divert them to doing what I wanted to do. And we started working a lot with industry because one of the things about working with industry was that thing I said at the very start about looking back to go forward. A prime example is I had a patent, still have a patent, it's lapsed now, on how to register a piece of paper accurately in a 3-foot wide digital printer. How to put it back in exactly the same place as it could. Hewlett-Packard insisted you couldn't do it. They tried to do it optically for years. We did it in an afternoon and then said, look, we've registered this paper to 1 pixel. And they said, how do you do that? And basically we put a steel bar down one side, so you put the paper against the steel bar as you do in the rest, and then pin registered it at the ends, and it goes back in exactly the same place it went in before.
Right.
But that's only because of the historical knowledge. Do you see what I mean?
Sure.
Of going back to what everybody else does. And then we got into 3D printing because we could. There was a large grant for expanding laboratories that was made available to universities that within my university only my department was eligible for. So that gave us nearly £1 million to buy equipment.
Did you have a dedicated building for all of this stuff?
Not initially. Initially, it was a series of sheds and not good spaces. It got better, and only in 2017, just before I finished being chair and Karina took over, we won 7 million as a centre of, there were 12 small centres of excellence who were given large amounts of research money across the whole research spectrum in the UK. And we were one of those. So we got given 7 million. And so we ended up with a beautiful dedicated space and lots of good dedicated equipment, which is why it's still going. I had enough money early on to buy, I spent 107,000 on a 3D printer, which you can now buy for about £5,000. Oh. But we took a gamble, and I bought 3 3D printers at the time. And the head of purchasing in the university said, "Oh, I've done you a deal. You can't just do that. I've done you a deal. I've got you a 3-year guarantee on it for another £3,000. And I said, "Yeah, but we're pouring clay in it." That's the end of our guarantee. And we developed a method of 3D printing ceramics.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Did some industry and some company buy the technology? And
no, we never sold it in the end. We still hold the patents. It's still much better in powder printing. There's a video you can find about 3D printed ceramics. Yeah, we nearly sold it to a couple of American companies, but in the end they went a different route, and actually it all fell apart.
Oh, okay.
They should have bought us. I'm sort of more proud of, we helped rescue a company called Burley, who were the last underglazed tissue printers, so printing from hand engraved copper plates. Their youngest engraver at the time was 72.
Oh.
And the whole factory was dependent on this one guy, Chris, and hand engraving copper plates that took him 4 months. And we developed a method of laser engraving them instead, which meant the factory now keeps going. The king put a pile of money in to keep the factory going as well. So
my mouth is wide open, people. I gotta talk to that guy.
God. Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, that was a few years ago. I doubt Chris is still around now.
If I could, I would.
Yeah, so we used to do a balance of industrial work and working with artists. We worked with Leslie Dill quite a lot, Richard Hamilton, Peter Blay. Yeah, just lots of artists.
Well, there's on the website at the University of the West of England, UWE, as I heard you say.
UWE, yeah.
Which is hilariously wonderful, that you do have an additioning arm.
Yes, that's right, we do. Yeah. Which has changed. It's now more about up-and-coming artists and mid-career artists than big names, rather. And initially, it was only viable if we could charge a lot.
Oh, sure.
To spend. Whereas now that we had dedicated resources for artists to come in, so it's a bit easier.
And so the additions are the result of some residency program, I assume.
That's right. Yeah. And only people who we deem interesting in terms of bringing something to the research centre.
You can't just apply?
You can't just apply, no. And it's difficult because lots of people want to come and everybody says, "Oh, can I come for that?" No. What are you bringing and why?
Yeah.
And one has to be ruthless. But I think it is interesting if you bring something that will assist or help, because it's now expanded into, it does a lot of work in nanomaterials and textile conservation, the textiles that are good for the environment, lots of robotics, lots of large. At one point, we had, 17 or 18 different types of 3D printer. So we slowly moved into robotics.
Oh, wow.
Lots of CNC. I mean, one of the big things is a thing called a HAS, which is what's called a 6-axis CNC machine, which means it can drill and remove stuff in any direction. And then it also now, it's connected to a 3D printer that injects hot metal. So it deposits hot metal at the same time.
Wow.
That's fun. Yeah. Richard Hamilton used to say we were print heaven.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Because we had everything. It's great.
Congratulations, A. Quite a feat. B, you're retired, which brings me around to your own work. And do you feel like your work, which is primarily 3-dimensional, print related, but also sculptural, Do you feel like your experience building this center and going off into robotics, any of that stuff informed your direction in your own work?
Yeah, definitely. But I never thought of myself as an academic. On the other hand, I didn't want to compromise the art that I made. I wanted to make things I wanted to make and not be influenced by anything else. And I slowly realized I was an academic. I said, I'm not an academic. Somebody once said, tough shit you are, get on with it. But I kept the art separate. But yes, of course it's influence. I laser cut everything. Lots of things are inkjet printed. I use technology, carbon fiber rods and things in there. So yeah. But on the other hand, one of the technical guys that worked for me a while ago, I was building something. And he said, how did you work that out? I said, well, I drew it on my drawing board with pencil and ruler and then laid it out on brown paper and then assembled it all. And he said, but you often do things digitally and then you're hand drawing things so I like the mix of the two. I'm just as happy with my traditional drawing board. If I draw something up in 3 dimensions in Illustrator, I still have an old-fashioned plan, side elevation and front view, which I could use in 3D drawing programs, but I don't like them. I still like the old-fashioned equivalent of a pencil and a bit of paper. So I swap the combination of two.
I feel like the thing that you learned how to do the thing with, for me, remains the thing that makes the most sense. Like looking at the side view and that makes sense to me. I think we're of an age.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I grew up with. And I still have all my compasses and rulers and pencils.
Right.
And still, scalpel is still my favorite tool, probably. So, yeah.
I do love an X-Acto knife.
Yeah. Yeah, in England, it's a Swan Morton scalpel.
Oh, yes, much more scalpel-like. Nice. So you're making, as far as I can tell, primarily kites, flying apparatuses, apparati.
Yes.
Do they fly?
Theoretically, some of them could.
Okay.
When I started out, I had this whole thing, we touched on it earlier. You were talking about this thing that craft, especially in England, for many, many years in art schools, was a dirty word. Mm-hmm. As a fine artist, you weren't supposed to understand how something was made or what was in it or whatever. I started making all these kites that I put in frames with all the strings and hundreds of knots based on Japanese kites because they were craft. And I could put them in the gallery, if you see. And I was being difficult. But now it's quite interesting because the Crafts Council England would be quite happy for me as a printmaker to be part of as a craftsman, but I still show my work in galleries. So now I've no idea. And I don't think it's such a dirty word anymore.
That's what I think, yeah.
I think it's changed.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is good.
I know a few years ago, I went to a Southern Graphics Council printmaking conference and a lady called Alicia Candiana, introduced me to a whole group of students and said, this is Steve Hoskins from England. Will you introduce yourself? And I said, hi, I'm Steve Hoskins. I'm a printmaker. And then afterwards, some of the students came and said, you actually call yourself a printmaker? I said, I've always called myself a printmaker. They said, oh, we're not allowed to because that's not being an artist.
Oh.
And I kind of thought, wow.
Yeah.
No, I'm a printmaker.
Plus, you're in the scenario you're standing in is the printmaking conference. Like, how was you supposed
exactly.
to do it? Oh, that's funny. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Printmaking, we're always the underdog somehow. It's just, it's crazy. And I think some of it's because of the ages-long association with commercial and industry. Has always held it back. And also, speaking towards the craft idea, you have to know what you're doing craft-wise. You have to be a craftsman.
And to be fair, I think for galleries, the third side is if you put prints on the wall, you can't sell them for the same amount as a canvas. So it's difficult.
Yes.
So that aspect I understand. But on the other hand, it goes alongside painting. And I make three-dimensional work, so that doesn't necessarily apply.
Right. Do you addition the kites?
Sometimes.
Part of what I like about them is that because you are so knowledgeable about the digital world and all of that, you are going to unmachine, no engine, very simple flight form that is eons and eons old, and even looking towards Eastern traditions in it. So it's like a kind of really interesting intersection of all that's in that brain of yours, which is immense and really impressive.
Thank you. But you're right. Yeah, I do love the simplicity. I mean, last year we went to a Japanese kite festival for a month, which was just wonderful. In a tiny northern corner of Japan.
I feel like I talked to somebody else who went to that. Who was that? Oh, I'll have to come up with that one. Cool.
Yeah. I went to the Shironi kite festival.
Oh, super cool. Well, so do you have gallery representation?
At the moment, no. I show with the Bankside Gallery in London, but now I'm retired. It's back to looking for gallery representation. Yeah, I've got time to make more work.
When did you retire?
6 weeks ago.
What?
Yeah.
Wow! Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh,
I'm enjoying
You're not bored yet?
No, not bored yet. No.
Oh, that's great.
No.
So now you have time to write another book.
Maybe not. I always have this thing that maybe as I get a bit further down, that I got one more giant magnum opus. I don't think there's ever been a printmaking book, I've always thought, that's about that real relationship of where it came from industrially to where it is now. As I was saying earlier about, I have all these hand-drawn theatre posters that are on giant litho stones that were made in the 30s. And because I'm nearly 70, then, that isn't that long ago
right.
in real terms. And I think people forget that it isn't that long since a lot of what we did, and commercial screen printing was big when I was learning to screen print, and it disappeared. I mean, it's only really artists that screen print in any way anymore.
Yeah, you don't need to, do you? Huh.
No, digital destroyed it. I used to go to an industrial trade fair in Germany, in Düsseldorf, called Drupa, which was on every 5 years. And when I first went, screen printing, it had 22 giant halls, 6 weeks build, was on for 3 weeks, 6 weeks breakdown, flying huge jumbo jets of people in every day. Huge, big deal, still is. And it was 2 halls of screen printing when I first went. And when I last went in 2010, there was less than half a hall of screen printing. It just shrunk.
Gosh.
So these things are just disappearing.
Yeah.
Commercially. I mean, when I was young, every town had 3 or 4 little litho printers where you could go and get a little job done. They'd print 200 or 300 of something for you, whereas they've all disappeared.
Yeah. Oh.
Which is, it's just different.
True enough. And the individual artist will keep some of it alive, but it's definitely,
But then there are, in Europe alone, there are 70 printing museums.
I know, that's incredible.
It's still well alive in Europe, in museums.
Yeah. I don't know.
They have problems.
There's just like tons and tons of people doing letterpress, everything.
Yeah.
Like that. I don't see that dying anytime soon.
No, I don't. Not now.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I thought originally it was a backlash against digital technology, but I'm not sure it is. I think people just like it.
Yeah, I thought it was a backlash too, but I think you might be right. But that's how it goes, right? William Morris and like the backlash against industrialization and all.
Yeah,
it goes in cycles.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I'm sure we could talk for another 5 hours about all of these things.
It's been good.
Yeah. Is there a show coming up or anything you want to tell us about before I let you go?
Yeah, I'm actually not having much showing this year because we're just about off for 4 months traveling around Europe.
Wow.
But oddly enough, we're going all the way down. My wife's an ex-archaeologist, so we're going to Croatia to dig for a bit, and then we're going down to Montenegro, Albania, and then back up.
Wow.
We have a caravan, so we'll be gone for 4 months.
Wow. Oh, fun.
So I've not been able to put all the shows and things that I would on this year. Next year is the one that I think I should be concentrating on.
Well,
so if anybody wants me to come and talk about ink at a residency, and then I'll
Okay, good to know.
I'll come and talk about
You
it.
and Michael could do a little road trip and do a little show and tell. Yes, I feel badly that we weren't able to include him today.
And so do I. I'm very sorry, but he is getting better. He's been quite ill. So.
I hope he continues to improve.
I'm sure he will. Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody's going to go buy their book in August when it's released in the United States.
Yeah.
Pre-buy it on Amazon, the devil, and yes, and read some incredible, Jesus, it's just so chock-a-block full of great information. So well done. And thank you for doing a service to the whole entire ecosystem.
Thank you. Very pleased. And thank you. It's great to talk. So
it has been fun. I've really enjoyed it. And I thank you for doing it.
Thanks a lot, Anne. Keep in touch.
We shall. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this episode of Platemark with my guest Stephen Hoskins. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and was so happy to learn that much about ink. I'd always wanted to dig in, and as soon as I saw that there was a new book coming out, I knew Stephen was our guy. So thank you, Stephen, for being a great guest. As usual, I need to also thank my team, Dan Fury of Extension Audio, for being my sound guy. Thanks, Dan. And Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. Thanks, Uncle Michael. And Skip Barnhart and Lee Turner for sending me sounds from their studio that make up the soundscape at the top and bottom of each episode. We had additional help today, support in the image procurement situation from Brooke Sikorsky, a student of True Ludwig's over at Micah. Thank you, Brooke, for joining the team. Images we talk about are over in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. Over there, you can also hit support and donate and help me keep the lights on. All right, I think that's it. We'll see you next time.